The year was 1878. London did not just experience night. It was swallowed by a dot. November had brought a pea super fog that clung to the city like wet wool, tasting of coal smoke and the stagnant breath of the Thames. For Thomas, a 14-year-old mudlark who spent his days scavenging the riverbanks at low tide and his evenings running messages for Fleet Street, the fog was a familiar, if hated, companion. Tonight, however, the usual gloom felt different. There was a vibrating energy in the air that cut through the damp chill. Thomas stood near Westminster Bridge, clutching his thin woolen jacket tight. He shouldn't have been loitering. He had a lukewarm meat pie in his pocket that constituted his dinner, and his straw mattress in Seven Dials was calling. But the rumors had been flying all week, whispered by costermongers and shouted by newspaper boys, whose headlines he couldn't read. They were going to light the embankment with lightning. The existing gas lamps were already lit, standing like sickly yellow sentinels along the river wall. Their flames hissed and flickered in the breeze, casting weak, trembling pools of amber light that barely penetrated 5 feet of the dense fog. Beyond their reach, the city was a terrifying void of clattering hooves, shouts in the dark, and the deep, swirling blackness of the river. A crowd had gathered along the Victoria Embankment. It was a strange mix of society, gentlemen in silk-top hats huddling nervously under umbrellas, rough-hewn dock workers with clay pipes clenched in their teeth, and street urchins like Thomas, weaving between legs to get a better view. "It's a gimmick," a man in a heavy tweed coat muttered near Thomas. "Gas has served England since the days of Bonaparte. This electricity is a flash in the pan. Mark my words, it'll blow up or fizzle out." "They say it's brighter than the moon," his companion replied. Sounding unconvinced, Thomas looked up at the new poles that had been erected. They were taller than the gas lamps, topped with strange, frosted glass globes that looked like oversized pearls against the smoky sky. They held no wicks, no oil reservoirs. They stood dead and cold. He noticed a small group of severe-looking men standing near a junction box made of iron. One held a pocket watch, checking it obsessively against the clock tower of Parliament, whose face loomed hazily overhead. The chatter of the crowd grew louder, a nervous hum that rivaled the distant sound of the trains at Charing Cross. Thomas felt a strange tightening in his chest. He had only ever known a world lit by fire, by candle, by hearth, by gas jet. Fire was alive. It breathed, it consumed, it wavered. It was human. The man with the pocket watch snapped it shut. He looked at a colleague and nodded sharply. A heavy lever on the iron box was thrown. There was a sound, first not the familiar hiss of gas, but a violent, angry snap followed by a deep, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate in Thomas's teeth. Then the world turned white dot. It didn't happen gradually. It was an assault. 20 globes along the embankment simultaneously ignited with a brilliance that was shocking, almost painful. A collective gasp sucked the air from the embankment. A woman near Thomas screamed and covered her eyes. Several horses tethered nearby reared up in terror, their iron shoes sparking against the granite pavement. Thomas stood frozen. This was not the gentle amber of gaslight. This light was searing, clinical, and absolutely unforgiving. It was the color of a lightning strike frozen in time. It sliced through the fog, turning the thick smoke into luminous clouds of silver. The shadows, which had always been soft and mutable under gaslight, became razor-sharp chasms of absolute black stretched out behind every bench and person. Thomas looked down at his own hands. Under the old yellow light, they just looked shadowed. Under this new white glare, he could see every grain of river mud embedded under his fingernails, every threadbare stitch on his cuff, every smudge of soot on his skin. It was horrifyingly revealing. He looked up at the faces around him. The skepticism was gone, replaced by a naked awe that bordered on fear. The gentlemen in top hats looked pale, their faces stark and exposed. The dock workers stopped smoking, their pipes held loose in slack jaws. The gas lamps, still burning nearby, suddenly looked pathetic dim, archaic little flickers of the past. Drowning in this ocean of futuristic radiance, the humming of the arc lights settled into a steady, powerful drone, the sound of a new power unleashed. The fog swirled around the glass globes, illuminated like celestial halos. Thomas didn't know the science of it. He didn't know about dynamos or carbon rods. But standing there on the cold stones of the embankment, blinking against the glare that pushed back the ancient dark of London, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. The long, comfortable century of shadows had just ended. The future had arrived, and it was terribly, beautifully bright.